In this video, I'm going to help you understand the basics of photosynthesis. Let's start thinking about this question. If you had to, how would you kill a plant? I imagine you've probably come up with a few ideas, but what if you weren't allowed to touch it? Can you think of any ideas then? Did you think of this one? Don't give it any water. Or this one? Keep it in the dark. Now these would work because plants need water to stay alive, and they also need light. And plants need light and water so that they can do photosynthesis. So in this video, we'll make sure that you understand what photosynthesis is, why plants need to do it, and that you know the key equations for photosynthesis to get you good exam marks. I'll also add some check-ins throughout the video so that you can make sure you're understanding the key ideas. So welcome to BioSmash. I'm Jo, I'm a science teacher, and I'm going to help you to understand photosynthesis better. So let's start by looking at what photosynthesis actually is. Now, in these videos, I try to give you study tips, and one of these is if you've got a big word, to help you understand it, try to break it down to work out its meaning. So if we take the word photosynthesis, we can break it into two words, photo and synthesis. Let's look at photo first. What does the word photo make you think of? Did you think of this? Cameras need light to take photos. That's why you can't take photos in the dark. And the word photograph actually comes from a Greek word, and that Greek word means written in light. So when you see the word photo, you need to think of the word light. Now let's look at the word synthesis. So you might know that synthetic materials are ones that are man-made. So when you see the word synthesis, think of building something or making something. So when we put all of this together, when you see the word photosynthesis, you need to think of building with light. So when plants do photosynthesis, they're building with light. So try to remember that, and we'll come back to it soon. So hopefully by now you can remember one key fact, and that is that photosynthesis needs light. In the next part of the video, we'll look at why plants need to do photosynthesis. As we've discussed in previous videos, we get our energy from our food. But I'm guessing you've never seen a plant at McDonald's. So because plants don't eat food, they have to make their own. They need to make food to get energy, and sugar is a particularly good store of energy. Glucose is a type of sugar used by living things, and they use it as a fuel to give them energy. So when you see the word glucose, think of sugar. And plants need to make sugar or glucose, and they do this by a process called photosynthesis. So here's our next check-in, and this is why plants do photosynthesis. So plants do photosynthesis to make glucose. So you might want to write that key fact down. Well done for making it this far. Keep listening, because in this part we will make sure that you understand the equations for photosynthesis. Just as a reminder, plants are doing photosynthesis because they want to make glucose or sugar. If we look at the chemical formula for glucose, it looks like this. It's got 6 carbons in it, 12 hydrogens in it, and 6 oxygens. That's why there's a C with a little 6 after it. That means there's 6 carbon atoms. The 12 after the H tells us there's 12 hydrogen atoms, and the 6 after the O tells us there's 6 oxygen atoms. So this means that if the plant is going to make glucose, it needs 3 ingredients. It needs carbon, it needs hydrogen, and it needs oxygen. This means that our plant needs to take in carbon. So can you think of anything that contains carbon that the plant could use? Did you think of CO2 or carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide is in the air. It's got the formula CO2. There's no number after the C, so that means there's 1 atom of carbon in carbon dioxide. And there's a 2 after the O, so there's 2 atoms of oxygen. So if you've got 1 lot of CO2, you will have 1 atom of carbon and 2 atoms of oxygen. So now we know that plants take in carbon dioxide so that they can get carbon to make glucose. And here's our formula for glucose, C6H12O6. So we've got the 6 C's that we need. Now we need to think about where we're going to get the hydrogens from. So do you know any molecules that plants could use that have got hydrogen in them? Can you think of any molecules containing hydrogen? Did you think of this one, H2O, or water? So each molecule of water has got 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. So here I've drawn 2 blue hydrogens attached to 1 red oxygen. So the reason that plants need water is so that they can take in hydrogen atoms to make glucose. So now our plant has got the carbon it needs from carbon dioxide and the hydrogen it needs from water. And you may have realised that to make glucose, we're also going to need some oxygen atoms. Luckily for the plant, there is oxygen in water because it's H2O. There is also oxygen in carbon dioxide. That's why it's got an O in it, CO2. The O stands for oxygen. So the plant takes in carbon dioxide and water, and it's really taking in atoms of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen that it can use as building blocks to make glucose. And the plant uses light to break up the carbon dioxide and water molecules. And this gives the plant all of the atoms on their own so they can be used as building blocks to build the glucose. So you can see here all of the atoms have been rearranged to make glucose, which is 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. Now, because carbon dioxide and water both contain oxygen atoms, we actually have more oxygen atoms than the plant needs. So there is oxygen left over at the end. And the plant releases this oxygen as a waste product. So that oxygen goes into the air, which is really good for us because we need to breathe oxygen to stay alive. So if we write this in words, we started with carbon dioxide and water. The plant needed to take in light to make this reaction happen, and it used the carbon dioxide and water to make glucose, and by accident it also made some oxygen. So the equation for photosynthesis is carbon dioxide plus water gives you glucose and oxygen. So try to remember that equation. You might want to pause the video and write it down. And here's another revision tip. When you're trying to understand a difficult idea, try to make a diagram to summarise everything you need to remember. Let's give it a try together. So here I've drawn our plant and I've drawn the sun because we need light energy to make photosynthesis happen. And I've written on our diagram that the plant is going to absorb carbon through carbon dioxide. So that will remind me that photosynthesis needs carbon dioxide. Here, I've put an arrow showing the water going in, and I've written that plants absorb water because plants also need water for photosynthesis. I've also written a note to help us remember that plants are producing glucose. And I've put an arrow on our diagram to remind us that the plant is also releasing oxygen as a waste product because it makes oxygen in photosynthesis and it doesn't need that oxygen. Try to learn the word equation for photosynthesis because you often get asked about it in exam questions. You might want to pause the video now and write it down. If you've reached this part of the video, you must be working really hard at your revision and really committed to improving your grades. So I've got some exam type questions that you can use to test yourself on. If you don't feel ready for that yet, you might want to go back and watch the first part of the video before moving on to the last section. So here's our first question. Can you name 2 things that are needed for photosynthesis? So there's actually more than 2 possible answers, but see if you can think of 2 of them. And I'll put the answer up in 3, 2, 1. So here's the answer. You could have chosen carbon dioxide or water or light energy. So any of those 3, you just need to choose 2 of them. When you write, it's best to write light energy rather than just light because technically it's a little bit more scientific. Here's question 2. Why do plants carry out photosynthesis? So what's the reason why plants do photosynthesis? So have a think. I'll put the answer up in 3, 2, 1. So the reason that they do it is to make glucose. That's the only reason that they do it. Okay. And question number 3. What is the waste product of photosynthesis? So have a think. Photosynthesis produces something that's not needed by the plant. So it's a waste product. What is it? And the answer's coming in 3, 2, 1. So the answer we're looking for is oxygen. Here's question 4. Why don't plants do photosynthesis at night? So instead of writing do photosynthesis, you could say photosynthesize. So why don't plants photosynthesize at night? See if you can think of an answer. And the answer's coming in 3, 2, 1. And the reason is because photosynthesis needs light. Remember, it's got the word photo in, which means light is needed. So when it's dark, they can't do photosynthesis. And finally, question 5, can you tell me the word equation for photosynthesis? So what's the word equation? And the answer's coming in 3, 2, 1. So you should have written or said carbon dioxide, add water. So they're the 2 ingredients that you need. Then you put an arrow, because when we do equations, we don't put equals, because if you put equals, that would mean carbon dioxide and water are the same as glucose and oxygen, but the arrow means that they become. So carbon dioxide and water react together to become, which is why the arrow is there, glucose add oxygen. And remember, glucose is the thing we want, or the plant wants. Oxygen is the waste product. And we've also written light energy over the arrow because this reaction can't happen unless the plant has light energy. So well done if you've got that right. If you've put the chemical equation, that's brilliant as well. So that's 6 CO2 adds 6 H2O, arrow with light energy above it makes C6H12O6 plus 6O2. But just try and remember the word equation. The other one is a bonus. We've covered a lot of ideas in today's video, so you might find it helpful to go back and watch it 1 or 2 times just so you can understand everything. When you're ready for it, our next video is going to be photosynthesis part 2. So depending on when you're watching this, it might already be available. I'll put the link below. There are also resources in our revision shop that you might find helpful. The link for that is below as well, and you can print off the summary sheets and some sheets to help you to learn key words. And a big well done to you for making it this far. If you found this video helpful, I'd be really grateful if you could give it a thumbs up or subscribe so that other people can find it too. And I'll see you again in another video soon.